DreamWorks. It's the Pepsi to Disney's Coke. Often as good or better, but consistently just behind in the marketing game. The upcoming release of The Bad Guys, starring Sam Rockwell, has drawn comparisons to Zootopia, which stars Judy Hopps. For decades, the House of Mouses seemed to be just ahead of the good old, Shack of Shrek. But does first really equal best? Who can even say which is better with any sort of objective authority? I can. I have that authority. I will weigh the similarities between a selection of films from both companies. Yes, I am consolidating Pixar and Disney. I call this the Lassiter. I'm Chris Goodmakers with ScreenRant, and it's time for the definitive duel of Disney versus DreamWorks. Using my patented method, I will determine which film is truly superior with such clarity that I will be able to predict the future. By the end of this video, I will definitively answer which is a better film, Zootopia or The Bad Guys, before the latter film is even released. Can you imagine such a feat, viewer? Being able to judge the quality of a movie without even seeing it. Let me give a little depth on this method and how incredibly well thought out it is. As an example, where better to start than with the upcoming animal-based caper? It's a good way to break down some of the more obvious elements that can distract a casual observer. One must analyze these films with a scientific eye. And what's more scientific than an unsourced chart? The Bad Guys tick some big comparative notes. Firstly, there's the idea of a society of different anthropomorphic animals who exist somewhere between fully human and pure animal. We're gonna chuck this similarity right in the bin. Why, you ask? Because this isn't DreamWorks copying Disney. This is just what happens when a generation of kids raised on Disney's Robin Hood grew up to become animators. Plus, there are regular human beings in this universe, while Zootopia has none because they band together to usurp their human oppressors. However, there is a similarity that we can take into account. Both The Bad Guys and Zootopia deal with police and criminality. They explore characters who exist within the dichotomy of law and order. Scholars call this a thematic similarity. So it's the first factor added to our patented "don't steal this or I'll absolutely be mad" comparison chart. The next important factor is character similarities. You can't have a story without characters, and you can't have an anthropomorphic crime fable without a suave canine criminal trying to go straight and voice acted by someone who's consistently the best thing about the film they're in. Pop that on the chart. But comparisons aren't just about the way things are the same. That's basic. You basic. And as the great paragon of wisdom Star Trek has taught us, sometimes our greatest strengths are our differences. I think Captain Kirk said that while punching a 6-foot foam rubber lizard man. Following Star Trek's example, our next factor is key differences. What makes these movies truly different? For The Bad Guys, it's the aforementioned humans, and that this is more of a heist film. Our final factor is a fear factor. Is there something about the animation, characters, or premise that makes you recoil in confused horror? I judge this on a mental scale of 1 to, oh my god, the good dinosaur, what the hell is your problem? So, we have our very scientific chart. Now we're ready to apply it to a selection of DreamWorks Disney films that most resemble each other. At the end, I will reveal the results and assign a winner determined by a custom algorithm I developed. How do I know this will work? Well, it's an algorithm. And as we all know, algorithms can never be wrong. Where better to start than at the start? Antz, with a Z, was DreamWorks' first animated movie, and Asylum mockbusters are less shameless about their influences. Pixar's A Bug's Life came out a month later, but it had been in production much longer. The most important similarity may seem to be that both these movies are about ants, or in DreamWorks' case, Antz. But that gets thrown out, as per our earlier discussion about a certain internet subculture going mainstream. However, a core theme in both movies is resistance and defense from an oppressive regime or system. In A Bug's Life, it's the evil grasshoppers, led by the tyrant, Hopper. The grasshoppers extort the community of ants to the point of starvation. The meek and weak Flick is sent on a quest to recruit others to aid his town. It's a 6-legged 7 samurai. That's 42 legs! Antz is about the ultra-authoritarian ant general Mandible, who starts a war in order to perform a coup d'etat on his colony's leadership. He is vexed and eventually thwarted by once meek and weak Z, who went on a quest collecting others to aid his cause. We can also add several mentioned character similarities with the wimp to hero, the tyrannical bug. Oh, and also don't forget the princess love interest who's charmed by the lead's plucky energy, or the Jasmine for short. So there's a lot that's the same. At least enough to start a fight between DreamWorks CEO Jeffrey Katzenberg and then Pixar owner Steve Jobs. But what are the key differences? While both films feature similar leads, A Bug's Life is more of an ensemble with supporting roles from great comedians, and Dennis Leary. Antz is almost strictly a Woody Allen vehicle. I already know that's going to cost it some points. As for the recoil factor, well, A Bug's Life has most of what's happening with Heimlich the Caterpillar, but Antz has the unbridled horrors of termite war. You don't have to have the amazing investigative skills of Judy Hopps to know which is coming out on top of this one. It seems like the next logical set of films to compare would be A Shark's Tale and Finding Nemo. This is not the best case study for our purposes, because throwing out that these are both fish-based movies, they actually have very little in common. Finding Nemo is a charming adventure film about a father looking for his missing son, while Shark's Tale is a rags to riches story involving gambling and organized crime. It's like a wet Miller's Crossing. A far better comparison is a beloved tale about a rodent cook and a bizarre fever dream about insect-human romance. While B-Movie and Ratatouille appear very different on the surface, there are too many similarities to ignore, and I really do try to ignore B-Movie. Both feature a main character who is an animal, often considered a pest and voiced by a popular stand-up comedian. They are portrayed as far more intellectual than their community, which is also their entire extended family. They aspire to something greater after discovering a world beyond their day-to-day existence. They ally with an adult human that helps them into an appropriate profession to further the plot. Ratatouille has high cuisine, and B-Movie has civil law. Eventually, both main characters uplift their brethren through earning the respect of humanity and their animal community. Both movies close on the protagonist operating their own small business. Remy has his restaurant, and Barry B. Benson practices law with the same keen understanding of interspecies legal proceedings as one Judy Hopps. Interesting fact, Judy Hopps wasn't always the main protagonist of Zootopia. Initially it followed Nick, but test audiences found themselves drawn to the delightful charm of... Sorry, I was on a Judy tangent again, wasn't I?
Yes!
What about the differences? Well, besides the surface difference of bees and class action lawsuits, B-Movie is more about workers' rights and corporate exploitation. Ratatouille is far more personal, acting as a love letter to food and cooking. It's also about how creativity can come from any place. As for the recoil factor, well, do you actually want street rats making your food? B-Movie does have the whole romantic tension between an insect and a giant woman. Many have made endless comedy of this aspect, but that's just kink shaming, and I won't tolerate that. Just as I will not tolerate a small dog being allowed to legally adopt a child. It's unnatural and against the very core of the... It's time travel versus time travel. Meet the Robinsons is the CGI Disney film from an age when they were trying to compete with Pixar rather than just shunting them off to Disney+. It's a tale of a bespectacled orphan who finds family in an unexpected place and has a grand adventure involving time travel. This is the joke where I say the exact same thing about Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Besides the obvious timescapades, the idea of a found family is core to both movies. There are also the deep similarities between kid leads Sherman and Lewis.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. they're the same picture.
Alright, quick butt covering caveat that yes, Mr. Peabody and Sherman existed long before either film we are discussing, but those original shorts were glorified educational cartoons with no plots. And Sherman looked even more like an insufferable nerd. So we have a clear similarity between themes and characters. What's the difference? Robinson's looks more to the future and doesn't really offer any glimpses of the past. Mr. Peabody finds more fun in bringing a small child to the French Revolution and dressing him like this. How could anyone question his parental skills? And recoil factor? Putting aside my problems with the interspecies parental rights of certain breeds of terrier, the whole aspect of ripping apart the fabric of reality and our knowledge of King Tut's fate leaves a dark shadow over this fun romp. Almost as dark a shadow as the horrific apocalyptica of Meet the Robinsons' robot uprising. It's like if the Terminator happened in the Toy Story universe. So now we have our cross-section of Disney and DreamWorks films that closely resemble each other. When we input this into my one-of-a-kind algorithm, they will be objectively weighed. Because of the magic of editing, I have the results now. A Bug's Life edges out Antz. In the end, Antz themes hit harder, but it lost too many points for melting Danny Glover. Rough start, DreamWorks. But in our second round, it's a surprise victory for B-Movie. Yes, Ratatouille is charming and delightful. However, this algo doesn't judge romantic preferences, and B-Movie is certainly harder to forget. Congrats, Jerry Seinfeld. Maybe this will stop you from complaining about millennials for 10 damn seconds. Here we are at a tie, and the decider. It's the one with the glasses kid. What? It's an upset as Mr. Peabody and Sherman edges out Meet the Robinsons. I guess if a dog can raise a kid, then I can make my 6th grade programming teacher proud. Look at me now, Mr. Boonsworthy. So that means that applying the same formula, we can objectively say that the bad guys will be better than Zootopia. What? Huh. It looks like the algorithm has added an unexpected new factor that has thrown the entire deliberation off. It looks like the new factor that will definitively determine the answer is, does this film contain Judy Hopps? Weird. I guess the algorithm, in its infinite knowledge, devoid of any outside influence, has determined the most important thing about a movie is Judy Hopps. So, we can definitively conclude that The Bad Guys will not be a better film than Zootopia because of the sole reason it has not featured the flawed but relatable, tenacious, endearing, and plucky Judy Hopps. Wait. Am I in love with a cartoon rabbit?
Yes, you psycho!